Donovan Cummings, historian of the California High School Speech Association, in the studios at Delta College, San Joaquin Delta College in Stockton, California. It's here at Delta College that we're holding the 40th anniversary state speech tournament. And it's my pleasure this morning to have a conversation with one of our Hall of Fame coaches from Del Norte High School in Crescent City. So, good morning, Jack Stafford.
Good morning, Donovan.
I think the first thing we'll do is try to take you back in time. It's a little difficult for some of us now to go back, but where were you born? Where did you go to high school? What is your childhood background?
Well, I grew up in Southern California, and it was a small community. Port Hueneme was where I actually grew up. It was a satellite community of Oxnard. And so, although I attended elementary schools in Port Hueneme, I went to high school at Oxnard High School. At that time, it was one of two high schools in the district, and since I think there's 17 high schools in the Oxnard School District now.
When you were in high school, did you compete?
No, I stayed as far away from a speech class as I could.
That's interesting. That's really... Then where did you go to college?
Well, I went to several colleges. I started at junior college. I started at Ventura Junior College. I went to Santa Barbara City College, and then I transferred to San Jose City College. And it was at San Jose City College that I took my first speech class. And I avoided speech all that time, not because I was ever frightened or anxious about speaking. Never thought of that. But I just thought it was another English class, and I didn't do well in English classes. And so I avoided speech, but once I took a speech class, I enjoyed it a lot.
Did you do any competing in college?
Oh, no. It was strictly, I took Speech 1 and Speech 2 at San Jose City College, and just did the speaking in the classrooms, was totally unaware that something called forensics even existed.
Now, Jack, here you are, a successful coach, a Hall of Fame coach. In high school, you stay away from speech. In college, you take a course or two. You don't do any competing. Now, how did you get into this business?
Well, it's even stranger than that, because when I transferred to San Jose State College to complete my education, they told me that I had to have a major and a minor. Well, I changed my major and minor so many times that I didn't have the slightest idea of what I wanted to do. But I looked at my courses and I realized that I had more social studies and history classes than anything else, so it was pretty obvious that I would become a history, social studies major, which I did. And there was no problem getting into that department. Well, my next choice was to be a PE minor, because I had done a lot of athletics and I had been involved in a lot of different intramural sports, and I enjoyed that. So I went over to the PE office to sign up to be a PE minor. Well, I walked into the coach's room, and there was a coach sitting there with his feet up on the desk, and I said, well, I'd like to be a PE minor. And he said, oh, great, fine, we love to have PE minors. And he says, what sport are you going to play? Well, at that time I was married, I had a child, I was working 40 hours a week and going to college. And I told him, I said, can't play any sport. I said, I don't want to do any sports. He said, oh, sorry, son, you can't be a PE minor because you got to play a sport at this school to be a minor. So I walked out of his office thinking, well, that's a done deal. And I later found out that that was not true. I wasn't even talking to the head of the department. It was just a coach that was in the office at the time. And I could have been a PE minor, but I didn't get the right person at the right time. Walked over, I thought, well, what will I be a minor in? I thought, well, you know, I got 2 A's in speech at junior college. I think I'll be a speech minor. That's good. Start off with 2 A's in the field. So I walked over to the speech department, and they're glad to see me. There's no speech minors hardly anybody signs up to be a speech major or minor, either one. So I walked in the office, and they were shaking my hand and telling me to sign on the dotted line, and I did. And they said, well, you have to take a speech class in your first semester here. And so they signed me up for something called Speech 150. All right, I showed up to my first class of Speech 150, and I go in the room, and there's a professor, and his name was Dr. Koch, and he's up on the board. He starts diagramming the larynx, and he starts talking about all of the mechanisms of the vocal cords and so forth. And I'm going, wait a minute, this is not speech, what I'm thinking of, public speaking. And so after the class, I said, Dr. Koch, I said, you know, this is not really what I had in mind. I said, you know, I'm interested in public speaking. He said, well, you're in the wrong department. You signed up for speech therapy. And I went downstairs, and the speech therapy and the speech communication office were in the same room. And I just signed up in the wrong line for speech therapy. Well, I said, well, we can change it to a speech communication minor, but you have to complete this course. So my first course in speech was a therapy class. And I went through all the routine of observing stuttering and aphasia and all the other types of things. It was a good course, but I changed and became a communication major after that. I was still a social studies major, and what I discovered was that I grew to like speech much more as I took more classes in the department. And pretty soon I was in a position where I was taking more speech classes than social studies classes. And they said, well, there's no point in changing your major. You might as well just declare a double major and have speech and a history social studies major. So that's what I did, and I graduated with a major in both. But at that time, San Jose State had no forensic program. In fact, they almost de-emphasized forensics at that point. Finally, when I was a graduate student in San Jose, they said, you know, by the way, if you're going to be a speech teacher, you probably need to know what forensics is. So they sent us out to judge a speech contest. And that was my first exposure to a speech contest in my graduate year at San Jose State.
Wow. Now, did you start teaching at Del Norte?
I did my student teaching at Overfeld High School in San Jose with a man by the name of Rick Sherman, who was a good speech teacher. And he also didn't have any forensic program. He didn't believe in forensics. And the other choice that I could have gone to was somebody called Carmendale Fernandez, but they chose to send me to Rick Sherman. And so I did my student teaching there. I received a call from Del Norte High School because I was very intent upon teaching speech. And they called me from Del Norte High School, and I had no idea where Del Norte High School was. Traveled up there, went forever. I didn't know that there was that much more of Northern California. And I started teaching there in the year of 1966, 67, and I've never left there.
Now, this sort of jumps in questions here, but I think it's important since you're a member of the Hall of Fame. What offices have you held in league and in state and that?
Well, when I taught required speech for 2 years at Del Norte High School, and then the speech teacher who was there, a lady by the name of Gladys Hugh, just said she'd like me to take over the program. And at that time, we had a small league in Northern California called the Redwood Speech Association. And it was not affiliated at that time with the California Speech Association or any other forensic activity. But we had about 7 active high schools in the area, the Eureka and Del Norte area. And we had a league there, and my first experience with an officer was I was the president of the Redwood Speech Association. Then, when later I joined the Golden Gate Speech Association, and I was the individual events director for a number of years in that organization. And I was asked at that point if I was interested in becoming a member of the California High School Speech Association. And my first position was a representative at large. And I served in that capacity for a couple of years. And then at one point I decided I would like to do more, and I ran for the area chairman position. I was area chairman of Area 1 for 4 years. Then I became the vice president of activities for the California High School Speech Association for 4 years, and then the president for 4 years of the association. I'm still a member of the California High School Speech Association, serving currently as a curriculum representative. This year I also became the district director for the National Forensic League for the Capital Valley Forensic Districts of the Sacramento area.
Now, with all this experience that you've had in various offices of the association in California, I'm going to ask you a few questions related to that.
Okay.
From the time you began until now, what significant changes do come to mind as far as the association and speech in California?
Well, I think the association itself has become a little bit more solid. Some of the recollections I have of some of the earlier state tournaments were a little ragged. I think the state tournament has become more solidified. I think we run a better state tournament. We've expanded the events that we offer. There are new events since I started, like, well, actually expository speech was added since I've been a member of this organization. We've since added events like original prose and poetry. Lincoln Douglas debate has been added since that particular time. And some of the events that were considered to be more or less secondary events, like Congress, have become much more important. And I think there's a much better balance currently among the different events in the organization. Mm-hmm. I think that the people that I see coming into the organization, at one time, all of the speech coaches were teachers who coached speech. Now I'm seeing a lot of people who were more than likely in forensics as competitors who are coming back and coaching forensics as part-time positions or as what we call walk-on coaches.
None of us would be successful in our profession, probably, if there weren't some other coaches that helped us along the way or who we admired. And you might make some comments about, over the years and from the beginning, what coaches in California have been significant to you.
Well, I mentioned that I didn't have much forensic experience. I mean, literally none coming into high school. My first 2 years, I taught required speech at Delaware High School, and the speech coach was Gladys Hugh. Gladys was a fine speech coach, very good woman. She is still active in our community. She retired many years ago, and she was a great person for me to start out with. She asked me if I wanted to go to some of the tournaments with her, just to observe, to help out, and I did that for the first 2 years I was there. So I knew a little bit about, by that time, what I was getting into. There was another coach in that league, a lady by the name of Marilyn Fletcher, who should be in a lot of Hall of Fames, but you'll never see her name there because she was in the wrong area and didn't probably coach speech long enough. But she was an excellent coach, and I think I learned how to be a coach from her because she was a very competitive woman, but she was very sharing also and taught people how to do things. When I moved up to a bigger league, the Golden Gate Speech Association, one of the people that I was most impressed with, and not from a distance but close up because he would come and talk to me and help me out, was David Dansky. David Dansky was a very, many people know his name because he's been so successful and has a lot of credits to his background. But I tell you, he was a person who, when he saw somebody who he thought would promote the program speech, he would help them, he would give them any assistance he could, and he did that for me. Those are some of the people that I, as far as forensics goes, that I would say that I admire the most. And I've been associated with a lot of people that, like yourself and Ron Underwood and a lot of other very, very excellent, outstanding people in the field of forensics. But those were the ones that were really close to me in my early career.
Well, that kind of question is always dangerous, I know, because we always think we should have a long list and name every coach we ever knew. But there are always a few that are very significant, and that's interesting. Now, another difficult personal question, but I think it's important for people to know answers to questions like this. What do you consider your major contributions to speech in California and to the organization?
Well, as I guess is what you might call as a administrator, or somebody who, not working with students, but somebody who helps with the programs, I would like to believe that I have always been a strong advocate of curriculum, and I've always tried to make sure that any speech competition that we were involved in not only produced people who won awards, but also taught them something about good speech communication behavior. Like I said, I came out of a program at San Jose State that really emphasized that, and they felt, some of those professors I had there felt that forensics couldn't do that. And I always remember that, and I always try to make sure that when I teach students or when I deal with people in our various groups, that I try to emphasize that it's got to be good communication behavior as well as speaking that wins awards and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Now let's do a little switch from yourself to students.
Okay.
And I don't know whether you have the numbers at the tip of your fingers. That's
right
not
here.
important. But if you do, how many times have you had students go to state and nationals?
The first year that we went to the state tournament was in 1973. And since that time, we've qualified, Delaware High School has qualified students to the state tournament every year but twice. And I know because I have counted. And right now we stand at 92 students have qualified from Delaware High School in that period of time. to the state tournament. And I'm a few more years to go, and I'm hoping to get to 100, and that'll be a milestone for me. During that time, I believe that 9 of the students have qualified to the final round of the state tournament, and we've won every position except first place, 2nd through 7th, but never first place. Number of students have qualified to the nationals. My most successful competitor was a boy who competed, Andy Morris, who competed in both extemp and Lincoln Douglas debate, and he was a quarterfinalist in Lincoln Douglas debate and a semifinalist in an extemp event.
I remember, Andy.
One more thing.
Go ahead.
Let me mention this, because this maybe for a lot of people this is the most significant student I ever had. I had a young lady who won the Voice of Democracy at the state level and was a finalist at the national level, and she won over $25,000. And a lot of people saw that as the biggest accomplishment that anybody ever achieved.
When I was going to interrupt you there, I was going to say other students that are strong in your memory. Would you like to mention some others, talk about some others?
Well, you know, one of the things that I always like to think about, and I like to get reminded of this every now and then, is there's a lot of students who didn't win awards and didn't go to nationals, didn't go to state or anything else, who have been very successful. And I think that's one thing that all speech people should always remember, that there are a lot of kids out there who maybe only went to 1 or 2 tournaments, but they learned something about giving speeches, about speaking in public, that has helped them throughout their lives. And I think there's a lot of those running around. I have a number of students who I am still in contact with that were successful, that have gone on to do important things. I have a young lady right now who, as I understand, her mother tells me she is working as a campaign person who gets contributions for President Clinton in Washington, D.C. She was a Native American Indian girl from Del Norte who was in the speech program, qualified to the state tournament, and she's been very successful in that realm of activities.
When we go to these tournaments with our students, to state and to nationals, invariably there's something that happens. Or some years are more interesting or more exciting than others. So here's your opportunity to share with us any special experiences that you've had at state or nationals.
We were talking about this on the trip to this tournament. A couple of years ago, I had a young man. I have a very strict policy about, we have to travel great distances to go to our tournaments. And I have a very strict policy that they have to be there at the bus or at the van, whatever it is, on time in order to get on board. And if they're not there, I give them a very short grace period, and we're on our way. So they realize that if they're not there on time, they're going to get left, and it really doesn't much matter who they are, whether they're the star or the last place speaker. That's the rule, and I've pretty much followed that over the years. 2 years ago, we're coming to the state tournament, and I had several students that were coming that year with me. We was taking one van, and so I arrive at the high school to pick up the kids, and we all are there except for one boy is missing. And so this is the state tournament. We're in no big hurry to get there, and so I said, well, we'll just wait for Jason to arrive. Doesn't show up, and I said, well, has anybody seen Jason? Well, yeah, I saw him pull through the parking lot, and he looked around and pulled out. Well, we thought, well, I wonder where he's gone, and we called his father. His father, oh, no, he left to go to the tournament. He should be there. Waited a half an hour. He didn't show up. Called his father back, told his father, well, we have to leave. You know, if you can make arrangements to get him to the tournament, you can send him by bus or whatever arrangements we have to do, we'll try to get him there. So they said, well, you know, I bet he thought he missed the van and took off on his own. I said, he wouldn't do that. We're driving down the road. We're 30 miles now out of Crescent City, and here he comes back in his car. So we pass one another. He sees us. We see him. We stop, and I said, what was the deal? He says, well, I was 5 minutes late, and I knew you were going to leave me. And so he had driven 30-some miles down the road, thinking that I was going to leave him, you know, going to the state tournament, you know. And he was a junior that year. The next year he qualified the state again, and the first thing I told him when he qualified, I said, I will not leave you. I guarantee you, I will find you that morning, and you will go with us. But that happens.
Okay, this is the part of our conversation, Jack, that's wide open. If I've missed any questions that you would, or ideas that you would like to discuss, this is your opportunity to talk about it, whatever you'd like in the realm of high school speech.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I guess that I've had a few philosophies about teaching speech that I think are important. I came to the realization right away that this was not a job. This was a hobby. Anybody who does this for money. In fact, I talked to a young lady this week who told me she's going to take the activity directorship at our school because she needed some more money. Having been an activity director at one time, I told her that was the most ridiculous thing in the world to do, because the money is in no way compensating for the time and the effort you put into it. Speech, for me, has been a hobby. It's been what I enjoy doing. I don't build model railroads, or I don't collect stamps or anything like that. I do speech. So the time that I put into it, I feel is my hobby time. And so I don't ever regret or don't ever feel as though that I'm putting too much time in it, because it's what I enjoy doing. And I think that I would recommend that for anybody who's going to do any kind of an extracurricular activity like that, you have to look at it from that point of view. If you're doing it for money, it's definitely the wrong reason, and you'll never get adequate compensation for what the time you're doing. I've always tried, when I first started coaching, like I think a lot of young coaches, it made me angry when students wouldn't go to a tournament I wanted them to go to, and I lost that quality pretty early on, fortunately. And I came to the conclusion that if they want to go, they want to get ready, it's their choice. And they have to make the decision about doing those things. I can give them as much help and as much time to get ready and to get prepared and things, but as far as I can't make any student go to a tournament, and if I do, I'm probably going to regret it. And so, I think that you just have to be a little bit more mellow in terms of dealing with things. But maybe that comes with a little experience and age and other factors, too. I think those are important things. I'm very pleased that I was in this for the length of time I've been, and still have some time left to do it. And it's been really a rewarding experience for me. It's been maybe the most significant thing I've done in my life, is to be involved with speech. And I feel I've been in a position to do something that I enjoyed that also helped people. And that's a very good feeling. So I don't know. Those are some of the things that I think about.
Well, I'm sure, Jack, that I'm expressing the feeling of hundreds of coaches in California when I say that we appreciate what you brought to speech in California. Most deserving member of our Hall of Fame. And I want to express my appreciation for, on the morning when you're registering for the state tournament and you're worried about students and all that sort of thing, that you were willing to come in today and spend this time with us. So once more, Jack, thank you for sharing your ideas with us.
Oh, I appreciate being here.